Cool. Okay. All right. Hi, I'm Jackie Flavin, Customer Insights Leader with Demco. Thank you for watching the Open Book webcast, where we interview experts about specific topics related to navigating the COVID pandemic and all the challenges that libraries and schools are facing in the wake of it. Today, I am joined by the lovely Mandy. Mandy is a high school art teacher at Performing Institute of Minnesota Arts High School and my new neighbor. She and her family moved here to Minneapolis, to our South Minneapolis neighborhood in April. Mandy spent the last couple months of the school year teaching her students sculpture remotely. We're so glad that she is open to talking with us about her experience teaching a hands-on subject remotely. So, Mandy, tell us about the art classes that you teach to get us started.
So I was hired at PIM last spring to teach their 3D courses. So I taught sculpture and ceramics mainly. This past quarter, I had a beginning sculpture class, a advanced ceramics class, and a painting class, all done remotely. So
Wow.
a little bit
Wow.
of everything.
Yeah. So when did you have to switch over from in-person teaching to remote? Was it mid-March with everybody else?
Yep, exactly. And what was interesting about our school is that we run on a quarter system. So every quarter I have a new batch of kids. So we actually got pulled out of school during our final exam week from quarter 3. And so starting online learning, I was starting with new students some of which I had before, but some I had never met. So it was not continuing with the same group for me. It was a totally new batch of kids.
Wow. And how much time did you have to get ready? Was it 24 hours, like we're closing school, or did you have a couple days?
So we wrapped up the quarter remotely. So basically we did kind of our finals online. And really it was, we kind of froze the grades where kids were when they left. And if they were able to turn in additional work, we would figure that in, but we weren't requiring anything of anybody for the week of finals. So after that, I had a week of spring break. And so really that was the time I had to plan. So a week I had to plan a remote quarter.
Wow. And were there any, did you find there were a lot of, was there a lot of support and guidance out there, or was it just figure it out?
Our school had a bit of I feel like we were in a really good place. We already had a plan and training on e-learning days for snow days.
Oh.
So if we were impacted by weather, we had a plan to get every kid technology. So we ended up being able to be one-to-one. We also were able to provide wireless hotspots or Wi-Fi hotspots for our students that didn't have access to internet. And we had already done some staff training on what e-learning days would look like, but it was on such a small scale because we were thinking that would be, for the occasional snow day so that we don't lose out on instructional minutes. So that was kind of where we started. Our school was really great about letting us kind of figure out what worked for us individually rather than mandating, rules and routines and curriculum delivery and that kind of thing. So we really got to work with our kids specifically and our content specifically to see what would work for us online.
That makes so much sense because all the different subjects are so different, right? I mean, performing arts are a whole range of things. So what works for this class probably won't work for this class.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that's great that you weren't starting at absolute zero. You've at least thought about some of the stuff beforehand. That probably makes it a little bit easier. Was that first week, would you stress scale, how would you describe it? Was it oh my God, what is going on? Or was it I think we got this?
The first week started out pretty good. Kids were showing up and reaching out and doing the work. I feel like we started out pretty strong and the kids were pretty engaged. And then I think when the long-term understanding that this was going to be the rest of the school year hit in, our kids really hit a wall. So, I mean, from our school is great because it's tiny. We have 315 kids. My class sizes are capped around 15, 16. So we were able to focus more on like the social emotional needs of our students rather than, really heavily pushing academics. So.
That's great. How did you teach your subjects remotely? I'm so curious.
So we found a loophole with the governor's mandate that people leave their places of business. The week after they canceled school or made school remote, there was like a clause in there that allowed for people to go back into their buildings and get the materials they would need in order to do their job. And so we used that time to build material packets for our kids and distribute those to our students. So I was able to go back in and create kind of a kit with, like for ceramics, with 15 pounds of clay and a sponge and a work mat. And then for sculpture, I made a bunch of bags with random materials like bamboo and leather and wire and newspaper and some basic tools and things. And then our painting kits we were able to put together with some watercolor and acrylic and a couple brushes and some paper, so that they would have basic supplies to work with. The problem was every kid got different supplies. I didn't have like supply packs per project set up, and I couldn't require them to go online and buy those things because they've already paid a fee, and those are materials that we buy throughout the quarter, and we use communally in the class. So for sculpture specifically, we spent the first couple weeks really focusing on found object sculpture and like nature installation artists, Andy Goldsworthy, and some other artists that really helped the kids see that they could work with what they had at home and they didn't actually need, paper mache materials or, specific materials that we would have in the classroom, that they were able to find things around their home and still create. So
yeah. That's a good lesson. It's kind of like an unintended awesome lesson that they had.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. And I was just thinking like how therapeutic art is, and I can imagine it really helping them through this time. Like,
yeah, I think so. We did I had quite a few students that are so hyper creative during the school year. I mean, they're going to an art school and majoring in visual arts and graduating with a certificate. And some of my most creative kids just shut down. It was so overwhelming for them to not be in the safe space and in the studio with students and teachers and people that they love on a daily basis, and to be, stuck at home, and not all of them have great home lives. So, home isn't their happy place, school is. So I did have quite a few students that really, they just shut down, and, that just led to so much more one-on-one emails, phone calls, texts, individual Zoom meetings, the face-to-face, as much face-to-face as we could do. But still, in the end, I had a few, probably 3 or 4 students that just took a no credit. They were like, I just can't. I just will take the no credit for the semester. So,
yeah. And so would you sort of, how did that happen? Like you would recognize like, oh, they're not really themselves, or I can tell there's signs of stress, and then you would just kind of try to connect with them as their instructor. And
yep.
Yeah,
exactly. So we had on Mondays, so our kind of schedule was on Mondays we would go live and kids could tune into the meeting, and then we would have like a Q&A at the end of the live meeting. And for me, it was basically the overview for the week, what they should be doing, where they should be on their artwork, what our critique was going to look like we did critiques every Friday. And in the beginning, like I said, everybody showed up for those Monday meetings. We did them during normal class time, and everybody was there. And then we would just do daily attendance checks every day. rather than having them have to tune in at a specific time. And the attendance checks, I would do like a 10-minute video on a sculptor and, ask for their thoughts, and their thoughts ended up being their attendance check. And so through those two kind of checks, I could see when kids stopped engaging. And really when they stopped posting any sort of art creation or weren't showing up for critique and even looking at their peers' work, it's, that's usually their favorite thing to do, is to sit down and critique each other. And, when you see that kid repeatedly not engaging, then yeah, it's pretty obvious that they need a call. So
is there like a playbook for that, like how you handle those situations, or you just sort of go with your gut?
I mean, I think it depends. We're all, teachers are trained for that to an extent, and some of us have had more social emotional learning training than others. The school that I was at in Colorado, we had a huge focus on social emotional learning. And so I came kind of equipped with a lot of strategies for, kids that have experienced trauma, or kids with mental health issues, and just how to engage as a teacher effectively, not how to counsel them or how to, give an intervention or whatever, but really just how to teach and how to make relationships, form relationships with kids that just come with a little bit more baggage than your typical student. So I think it probably, in our school is beginning that social emotional learning journey. But I know we had a lot of teachers that were really struggling with how that kind of balance of holding them accountable academically, but then also taking care of their social emotional needs first. So yeah, it was different teacher by teacher and subject by subject. I think if this extends into the fall, I would anticipate that a lot of our fall professional development that we do prior to going back to school will be around distance learning and around social emotional learning.
Right. Yeah. There's such a social emotional component for the educators as well, right? Like your world is turned upside down and you've got 2 kids at home, and I'm sure there's not enough like resources or support for you guys. How was your experience as an educator, and also like with your peers?
So as soon as school districts across the country started moving to distance learning, on social media, there were a lot of forums that opened up that were, teaching during COVID, and, teaching sculpture remotely, and all these different groups on Facebook that popped up. And so I went in and just joined all the groups so that I could kind of see what was working for people, and then have a place for my content that I could ask questions. My department at school continued to have weekly department meetings. Every Wednesday we'd check in together, and then that was really great because we'd be able to say like, hey, have you seen this kid? Has this kid been engaging for you? And we could kind of have those one-on-one conversations about students that we felt like were slipping through the cracks. We have, on Mondays at our school, we have professional development, and it rotates between a book club group and staff meetings and kind of our professional learning community meetings. And we kept those on, we kept doing those. And so, and then my school added a couple extra things during the week. That one was like just a lunch on Fridays that people could join a Zoom meeting and have lunch together. And then another one was like a distance learning practices that was totally optional. It was not something they were adding to our plate, but it was kind of a place people could come on and talk. So I think our school was pretty successful in creating those opportunities for teachers to feel supported, and to still have that sense of community where we could engage with our coworkers and, see what's working and what's not. And again, check in on kids across contents. And yeah. So
that's like the best, example of like handling it that I've heard so far. That's really great.
Yeah. My husband is a principal at a high school, and, they were really trying to do those same things. And one of their big successful things was like a coffee talk at 9 a.m. every day. People would hop on and talk about something totally unrelated to school or COVID. Like it was, you know, restaurants around town that you can't wait to go to again, or, you know, your favorite 80s movie or something totally random. And the first few weeks they did it every day, and then attendance kind of dwindled. So they just did it on Fridays, but they are continuing it. The request was that they continue it all summer. And normally their teachers really disengage for the summer. And it's nice that they still want that point of contact once a week with their
It seems like all over people are just being more human with each other. Like there's like coworkers are talking about mental health with each other, and we're all just like realizing that, you know, we need to stay connected. It's kind of, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if, okay, so if the school goes back to in-person learning in the fall, how will your classes have to change with social distancing? Will that be pretty easy or challenging? What do you think?
I think it'll be challenging in an art class specifically, just even from a supply standpoint. We have communal supplies that kids use. That we stock up on every year. We don't make them invest in their own toolkits for ceramics or their own pliers and things for sculpture. That would be an outrageous expense. So, we have those tools in the classroom, but I don't know how, from a sanitation standpoint, that's going to work. So it's almost like we're going to have to build a toolkit for each kid for the class, and then just do some heavy sanitizing at the end of the quarter. My classes, as I mentioned, are pretty small, but my classrooms are also really small. So I don't know. I mean, they're still saying classes of 10 or under, and it's just going to be real interesting. I think that a lot of the models people are talking about in some kind of hybrid, in theory, could work. Where they come in and there's groups that come in and learn Monday, Tuesday, and then they go home. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday is distance learning, but the teachers stay in the building all week and do different groups of kids that rotate through. I think where those problems lie is when you have educators that are also parents.
Right.
And so if my husband and I are both going to be at school full time, but our kids are in high school and middle school, and if they are distance learning on different days at different times, it becomes not only like a resource, like, do we have enough technology at home for them to do that, but also logistically getting them to and from school, supporting them from home when we're at school. So, I think from an equity standpoint, honestly, I think that personally, and people won't like this, but I think that distance learning becomes, the most equitable when it comes to your staff and how your staff can manage, and providing those resources and planning time in advance. So our governor here is not supposed to make a call on what the fall will look like until the middle of June. And I think the sooner we know, the sooner we can prepare, and we can do those sculpture packets that I can send kids home with, 5 kits for 5 assignments. And then we can have that, demo day, and then, troubleshooting one-on-one and that kind of thing. But honestly, logistically in the classroom, but then also your parents that are teachers. I just don't know. And I have not, honestly, I haven't heard a solution that works 100% for everybody. It just, and distance learning this way didn't either. There were kids that did not have access to technology in many districts for the first 4 weeks of distance learning. So, it overall is just so not ideal.
It's hard.
So again,
it's
it's the focus on the social emotional needs of your students. It's the academics almost go out the window.
Right.
So
do you think what do you think your students got from their classes this quarter?
So that was my final exam, was basically asking, I wanted them to kind of reflect on what they did well. And I really wanted them to focus on things that they got out of the class and challenges they overcame. I really tried to keep it positive. I wanted them to close feeling successful. And so I talked about, you know, what challenges did you face and how did you overcome them? I didn't even give them an opportunity to say that they didn't overcome them, because they all did. But I asked for, you know, what parts of the course were meaningful to you and what did you get out of this? And everybody overwhelmingly said that the content that they got from the daily attendance checks introduced them to so many more artists and so many more movements and techniques and just ideas that than they would have gotten in the classroom. I mean, for every assignment we do, we always look at a handful of artists and we talk about the history, but it's not daily. It's not a new person, a new technique every single day, because we're accounting for work time in the classroom. And every single day, my attendance checks were a different artist or an interview or a quick tour of a museum or something like that. And so they said, even when we go back, I hope you incorporate these things, you know, more frequently, even every day. Our classes are, I think 85 minutes every day. And they're like, couldn't we take 3 or 4 minutes at the beginning of class every day to like learn about a new artist? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I don't know why we couldn't.
Right.
So aside from some of the videos I showed them were 10, 15 minutes. So that takes up, you know, more time. But they really were just like hungry for learning about, you know, their local artists and then like their influences, and then, you know, creeping back in history of, you know, sculptors and how that has evolved as an art. So, so overwhelmingly that was what my kids loved about the course.
That's so cool. And I wondered, were you able to bring in, like, so many museums opened up themselves like virtually? I'm sure you could show them all kinds of cool things.
Yep.
We had so much access to so many things during this pandemic.
Yeah, the San Francisco Modern Art Museum had an ongoing like a weekly episode that they would put out, and they were in artist studios. So they would go to, you know, their artists that are showing in their museum, and they would go to their home studio and get like a tour of the studio, which the kids thought was super cool, because they're like, well, I'm building my own home studio right now, so it's cool to see these artists in their home studio, you know, and walking through their kitchen and then ending up in their place where they create. And I think for them to see that professional artists are doing the same things they're doing from a space standpoint was pretty powerful. They loved that.
Yeah, again, we're all just being so much more human with each other, you know?
Yep.
I love it.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome, and that's a good lead into my last question. So there have been so many challenges during this time, but I think there's also a lot of ways where the pandemic could have a positive long-term impact. And I'm wondering, where do you see like a big silver lining for you and your students and the broader community in all of this?
I think, you know, I think you've mentioned it a couple times, is that we're checking in on each other more often. We're making sure that we're okay. And I think sometimes when we get caught up in the hustle and bustle of daily life and the commuting to school and commuting to work and doing homework and sports and all those things, I think that we forget to check in on each other and see how we're doing. And so many of us have stress, pandemic aside, have stress and anxiety in our daily life. And how often do we check in on each other? So I think that, I do think that's a silver lining. I think people are a lot more focused on people's mental health, on people's emotional well-being, and really thinking about people that may be adversely affected in different situations, and checking in on those people. I can't tell you, being in South Minneapolis, how many people have checked in on me just during the last 2 weeks with all the unrest here, you know, just making sure we're okay and we're safe. And, you know, it's thinking about those things. It's watching what's happening and checking in on those people, even if they're not near you. So I think that's been a really beautiful thing that has kind of occurred from this.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Mandy. I really appreciate your time. This was wonderful, and I can't wait to share your story with other educators. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
And I'm sure I'll see you around over the next week or so. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.